the more people you talk to, the more evidence that you gather, the more pieces of the puzzle you have, the better picture you have of what the puzzle is going to look like. So you may, if you're like me, you put these pieces together, you put the borders first, and then you find the hard lines and corners, and you divide pieces by color or position, the pieces that belong to the house, and the ones belonging to the tree, and the ones belonging to the pond out front. And you start dividing them into large groups and then get smaller and smaller and smaller. The more information that you gather, the better the picture becomes, and the more you'll be able to tell what is relevant. You'll be able to, okay, I had two pieces I thought belonged. They look like pieces from the tree, but as I've gotten more information, I realized that this pine tree doesn't belong to this puzzle. That's a different situation, so you can put it to the side. So these different perspectives are actually a good thing. They don't negatively impact credibility. They're just a part of the process. They're just a normal aspect of any investigation. So you can't weigh them so heavily that they influence your case. Like I said before, this attitude of openness and belief applies to both sides. And I want to reiterate that because I don't want anyone to be able to claim that I'm for one side or the other. I'm not. I'm for a thorough investigation that is backed by evidence. And that's it. So believe what they say and then verify. I have had cases where the complainant walks in, gives me a statement, and after it's done, I walk out saying, that sounds good. That's completely reasonable. Could have happened that way. All right. And then 2 days later, the respondent comes in and gives me a very different story. And I walk out saying, that's reasonable. That could have happened that way. I believe that. All right. How can that be? I'm believing both sides. How is that possible? It's possible because I'm an outsider. I'm objective, and I'm able to think critically. I'm able to have two different thoughts at the same time. So what you need to do is you believe them, and then you look at, okay, what parts of their statement, what facts did they assert that I can go out and corroborate? They say that the person was wearing a certain color and it happened at a certain time at a certain place. I can corroborate that. I can go talk to witnesses. I can look at surveillance footage. There's ways to corroborate all the facts asserted. And every single time you can corroborate a fact, you are enhancing or building their credibility. Even if, and this is important, even if that fact hurts their side, hurts their argument. So a lot of times, and let me explain that. A lot of times when you are interviewing, people will try to only tell you what they think is going to help their case. So they edit their statement based on what they think you need to know or what's important. They don't actually know what's important. They don't have the training. They don't have the experience. They're basing this all on TV shows. But they will try to edit their own statement as they tell it, and they'll leave things out. And a good interviewer will see those and will ask the appropriate questions and will be able to get the information. The more open and believing you are, the more likely they will be willing to tell you information that they believe could hurt their case or be negative. In Title IX, a lot of times that has to do with other conduct that is against your policy. So underage drinking. A complainant may hide the fact that she was drinking alcohol because that is a violation of your policy. She doesn't want to get in trouble for it. And you're going to think bad of her that she's drinking underage and breaking rules. So she may apply this conclusion, not based on any facts, that you are not going to believe her because she was drinking. Right? This is an example, and it's one that I've seen. So she leaves that out. So it comes out later. You talk to the respondent, another witness. It comes out later that she was drinking and partying and drinking heavily. And you start asking yourself, well, that actually has no bearing on being sexually assaulted, right? The sexual assault has its own facts and evidence. Why did she hide that? What else is she hiding? Is she lying? Is this whole thing a lie? And you start questioning her credibility because she omitted something. Well, it's worth looking at But in the end, that doesn't, right? You can answer, you can explain why she left it out. If you do a good interview, you should have gotten it in the first place. So if you do a good job, you get it in the first place, and you go out and corroborate something negative, even though that may hurt the case, and doesn't have to be the drinking example, it could be something that is exculpatory. It's still, it might be negative to the finding or the case, but it enhances credibility. So it's helpful to credibility. So no matter where that evidence falls in the scale of your final evaluation, corroborating it enhances credibility. So you could have a case where there's no finding because you have all this negative evidence, but the person is still credible. And in fact, you can say they're very credible because they even told me negative things that I was able to corroborate. So any information corroborated builds credibility. So what happens if both sides could be true? If even after investigation, you are still stuck in the place where, yes, I believe her and I believe him, and they're telling different stories because I don't have any evidence to disprove either side. That's completely possible. It's happened to me multiple times. And all that shows is that you're doing it right. You're doing it correctly. You're approaching your investigation with an open mind. The fact that at the end of the day, you're looking at the evidence and you still say, I don't know, I can't have a finding because I don't have any evidence either way, and I believe both of them. Or the evidence could show, you could have enough evidence to have a finding where credibility doesn't even matter. The evidence speaks for itself. It doesn't matter whether the person was telling you the truth or lying. It doesn't matter if you find them credible or not. There's enough evidence to show that it happened. I had frequent cases where in my credibility assessment, where at the time I actually had a formal written assessment, I said the credibility assessment was not relevant to the finding. It had no bearing on the finding in this case. Or times where I said, I find this person credible because there was no information or evidence uncovered to prove otherwise. Nothing showed they were lying. So I can't say that they were telling the truth. I can't say they were lying. So credibility is a wash. So credibility is when you start looking at it as a formal process that has to be evidence-backed, it becomes much more complicated than just fake news, don't believe that person. If you can't back it up with evidence either way, then it suddenly becomes a non-issue. You can't use it, you can't decide credibility if you don't have evidence to either back it up or disprove it. And if the evidence speaks for itself, then that's what's important anyway. The whole point here is that your conclusions are backed and based on corroborated evidence. So if that's the case, then what does it matter whether you believe one side or the other? All that matters is the evidence.